Hi, everyone. Welcome to Godless Family Webcast. I am your host, Amanda Hayes, and joining me today is my co-host, Aubrey Adrianson.
Hello.
Today, we are going to be talking about dealing with devout family members with Tom Leeds of YouTube fame. Thanks for joining us, Tom.
You're welcome.
It's good to have you on the show. Did you want to tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do on YouTube?
Well, YouTube fame is a huge overstatement. I started a few months ago. I've been making comments for quite a while, and I had several people who seemed to respond very positively to the comments, and I had somebody who said, "You should really do your own videos." I said, "Okay," so I tried a couple, and those got some good response, so I did a few more, and a few more, and a few more, and now I'm up to 50 or so.
Yeah.
Working on my fan base.
Yeah, it's doing really well already. It looks like you have almost 500 subscribers. That's awesome.
Yeah, it's an interesting hobby.
Yeah.
So far. I've expanded. My Twitter account is tied to it, and I had Facebook tied to it, and I actually had a second Facebook, one for friends and family, who are not. Well, they're all pretty religious. So I created a new Facebook that was strictly for me and expressing my views. And in fact, I just started another community Facebook page of the same name to, once again, expand my exposure and expand the conversation.
Excellent. So for the people who haven't seen any of your videos, what are they typically about? What do you like to talk about on your show?
Basically, a lot of people have an attitude of atheists of being like Richard Dawkins, who I'm a fan of, but he's kind of over the top. And Christopher Hitchens, again, very over the top. I had this attitude that, atheism is a pretty laid-back philosophy. And there's a lot of atheists, a lot more than people realize, but they don't really say anything because they don't have a belief system that they need to advertise or reinforce. So nobody really hears about them. So I felt that the atheist community needs more exposure. And people need to understand that atheism is just a lack of a belief in the supernatural or any gods. And I want to add to the community and help people to feel comfortable in expressing their lack of views, and also feel comfortable in telling their family that they don't believe. Because there's some people who really relate to atheism as they do homosexuality. In fact, I've talked to a lot of people who think it's easier to come out as gay than it is to come out as homosexual or to come out as atheist, which seems a little crazy. But in fact, I have one video where I tell the joke of a guy comes home to holiday dinner and stands up to make an announcement. And he tells everyone, "I'm gay." And his parents say, "Oh, thank God, we were afraid you were an atheist."
Yeah, that is pretty common, unfortunately. I'm sure you've likely seen a lot of the articles that came out recently saying there was a poll saying that family members, the worst thing that their son or daughter could marry would be an atheist, which is really sad that they have such a negative stigma.
Well, and that's kind of what's behind the when I made the community page on Facebook, was just to let people know that atheists are just like everyone else. Everyone on the planet is an atheist to some degree. There is no one on the planet who believes in every single god. So everyone on the planet doesn't believe in some god. So we're all an atheist to some degree. Atheists just take one god further. We don't believe in any of them.
Right. I like that quote. Atheists just take it one step further. Awesome. So on the show, we're going to be talking about having devout family members. It's pretty common for atheists to have family members who are not only believers, but who have really strongly held beliefs. So I know you have a daughter. Is that the only child that you have?
Yeah, I've got one that's 6.
6.
And, yeah.
Okay.
And my wife is Catholic, and she's believes very strongly, though not so much of church. So she's bringing our daughter up to believe in God, and I don't want to say that I'm allowing it. I'm letting it happen, much in the same way I'm letting her believe in Santa Claus. Because as for myself, Santa Claus and God kind of played a similar role. When I stopped believing in Santa Claus, I pretty much stopped believing in God because I realized that some things were told to me that weren't actually true. And even though all my family's religious and they all still believe, for whatever reason, it didn't stick with me.
Hmm.
But I'm letting my daughter believe that there's a God, just like I let her believe that there's a Santa Claus. And the hope is that I will have expressed reality enough to her without telling her there is no God. Let her make her own decision about whether or not there is a God.
I've actually heard a lot of, not a lot, but many atheists take that approach with Santa. Like, we're going to do the whole Santa thing, and we're going to play it up, and then at the same time, we're going to do the whole Jesus thing. And when Santa falls apart, then we're going to have this conversation about Jesus as well, and kind of deconstruct that either together or just let it happen naturally for their child. So you're not the first person I've heard say that, and I think that's a very interesting approach.
Well, I think that the biggest problem with atheism or a lot of attitude is a lot of atheists are like, I'm not going to tell my kids about religion at all. I'm just going to let them, they don't need to be exposed to that. And I think a lot of problem, especially with the Muslims who are recruiting these people, especially in England where atheism is kind of huge, people who aren't exposed to religion are very susceptible to its lure because religion is it looks great. It's got great community and it's got a great story and great background and great traditions. It's very appealing.
Yeah, that's what Dale McGowan says, and that after reading his book, I kind of changed my tune because my attitude was I wasn't going to teach religion either until they were at the age of reason, where they could do critical thinking and and I've said this many times. My daughter was 3 years old, and other kids were talking to her about religion, and so that kind of burst my bubble. And then reading Parenting Beyond Belief helped me out. And so now they probably know more about the world's religion than the average child their age, and I think that's actually going quite well.
Yeah, I mean, I look at it as inoculation.
Mm-hmm.
Expose something to know what you're up against when it comes at you.
Well, and definitely teaching them about as many religions as possible, because once they are exposed to all of them, they can see a lot of the parallels and similarities and be able to draw conclusions from that. Like you said, a lot of them have a rich history and they are actually really interesting stories. So I think that exposure is really important from a really young age.
I was actually reading an Islamic story to my daughter the other night. My wife's like, "Why are you reading her that?" I'm like, "Well, it's another religion and it's interesting, and the more you know about religions, the more you see that they're all kind of the same and all very different, and they all disagree with each other. And you got to wonder if they're all kind of the same, but they all kind of hate each other and disagree with each other. Maybe there's not really, maybe they're just making this stuff up as they go along, which is what they are doing. So.
Right, and each of them think that their God is the one true God. Yeah. So, Tom, you said your wife is Catholic. Are the rest of your in-laws Catholic, or is your family Catholic? Your immediate family? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
My wife is Mexican, so her family's all Catholic pretty consistently.
Okay.
My family, on the other hand, is all over the place. Mostly Christian, but we got Protestants and Lutherans and Baptists, and a quarter of my family is Jewish. In fact, my sister, my father's Jewish, and my sister's the only one who followed along in that religious tradition. but we're kind of all over the place. And I think that's another thing that really helped me to acknowledge that religion is made up, because I go to all these different churches, and they'd all be telling me that this is the truth, this is the story, this is exactly how it is. But they all had a different story. So, especially as a kid, that was kind of meaningful to be told so many different stories, and everyone thinks theirs is the right one. Kind of told me that none of them were the right one.
Yeah, I know. I think on the pre-show you were telling me how you have encouraged your wife and your daughter to go to church. Can you tell us a little bit about why you decided to do that?
Well, like I said, as a kid, my family is all over the place religiously, and I went to a lot of different churches. Up till the age of 10, as my direct family, my parents, my family, we went to the same church until about age 10, and I went to Sunday school, and I got kind of kicked out. I think it was a squabble over Noah's Ark, and our priest kind of took me under his wing, and I think he knew I was an atheist before I even knew what an atheist was. And after I was kind of, not so much that I wasn't invited back, but it was like, okay, you don't have to go to that church anymore. We still want you to go to church. So I and my sister started going to other churches, and every time we went to go visit family members, we'd go to their church. Like there were Lutherans and Protestants and Baptists. So I went to a lot of different churches. I would like my daughter, in our community here in Oakland, Illinois, we have a very diverse community. So we've got Islamic and Catholic and Christian, and I mean, we got everything here. And I'd like to take her just to be exposed to the different traditions and storytelling that religions do. And plus, when we go visit my family, and when we have family here, we'll go to church with them and get a pretty good diversity of exposure.
Do you see your family quite a bit? Do they live close?
Actually, my family's all on the East Coast. We don't get to see them at all.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Well, by at all, I mean only like on holidays and such.
Mm-hmm.
So when they come here, we go there. But so she won't get as much exposure as I did as a kid. But you know, I'll do what I can, and I'm going to kind of treat it as a field trip, as an educational experience, more so than a religious experience.
That's actually a good way to look at it. I like that, treating it as a field trip, because then they can you can teach them to really sit back and observe what's happening. I like that. I'm going to use that.
Got lots of friends, and religiously, I'm sure she's got a very diverse bunch of friends. We have a very big Muslim community here, so I'm going to encourage her to go to church with her friends and get exposure to their religions. I'd like to be able to take her to a mosque, which is something that I never did as a kid. I've been to many, many synagogues. So that's...
Yeah, my son, I have a 6-year-old as well, and I am trying to teach him about religion as much as he's interested. And I wouldn't mind taking him to church, but I think that he would be really bored and complaining through the whole thing.
That's one of the reasons why I haven't pushed it so hard yet with my daughter either. You know, I've encouraged them to go, but you know, my wife says she doesn't want to go because I'm going to be snickering and rolling my eyes, and my daughter's going to be running around wanting to play. Can't blame her too much for not wanting to go.
I don't like that. I don't send my children to church just because. And I said this pre-show. The only people in my family is actually my husband's parents. They're the only ones that go to church. No one in my family goes to church. And they go to a Methodist church, and the children are not even in the service. They have like a kids room where they play and do art and learn how groovy Jesus was. And so I don't let them go I mean, they go sometimes, but I don't let them go very often because I feel like it's this way that the Methodist Church tries to seduce kids. Like,
It's all,
look, God is fun. Jesus is fun. You should come to church. And so I'm resisting it for that reason. But if they went to a church where the children actually had to sit in pews and listen to the sermon, I might be more up for it.
all churches do that. All churches try to make religion as fun as possible. If you look at, I'm very big on Apple and iPads and the different apps. And if you look at some of the applications that are available for the iPad regarding different, religions and religious stories, they're goofy as all get up. They're trying to sell the idea to kids that religion is fun. Because once you got them hooked, they're that much easier to keep.
Mm-hmm.
They're wanting to hook them while they're young.
Yeah.
If my daughter's going to church, I'm going with her, and we're going to be in the same place. If they want her in the kids' room, I'm going in the kids' room too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think it's really important for an adult to be there to be able to counterbalance that, so that they're not just hearing it from one side. Because that kind of is the core of indoctrination, is getting them while they're young. And it's interesting that you said that about making religion fun and trying to get the kids interested in it, because on a previous show we had talked about one of the little children's Bibles. And I've never read one, I've never opened one, but it really interests me to see if they include all of the stories from the Bible, even some of the really terrifying or gross ones, or how they would spin that if they did.
They spin it pretty fast.
Yeah.
Some of the stories, if you compare what's in the kids' version versus the real version, it's like watching the Smurfs next to, End of Days. It's just they take the most horrific stories and really make them toddler friendly. I mean, they're sugar coated beyond belief.
I really want to go and pick one up now. Now that we've brought it up a second time, because I'd like to see how they deal with, the bears mauling the children and things like that.
We did many. In fact, growing up, and I can't remember the name of it, there was one particular children's Bible, and it was on all the doctor's offices and all the dentist's offices because I saw it everywhere. I had my own. And it was the story of Noah in that book that started me down the road of thinking, that's not possible. That doesn't make any sense. And it was Sunday school disagreeing with what I was being told was true that got me into trouble.
Wow. Interesting. Okay, well, we can get into some of the questions. I've kind of liked the way that the conversation's going. But so you said that your family is kind of on the East Coast. You're not around them. What about your wife's family? Are you around them a lot? Is your daughter exposed to them quite a bit?
Them I'm around all the time. But most of them are much like my wife, where they're very religious. I don't want to say they flaunt it, but it's right out there. In fact, I did a video on indoctrination because got all the statuettes and the kids' statuettes and candles and all the. There aren't a couple of them actually have shrines, but yeah, it's a Mexican thing more so. But
yeah, I heard that the Mexican Catholicism in particular do a lot with the saints and shrines and.
Yeah. For them, it's the Virgin Mother. I forget what her name is. I should know because I hear it all the time. But the Virgin Mary, that's the lead. Everyone has a statue of her and everyone has a picture of her, but she's the big one that they all have. And but they're kind of like my wife, where they believe and they do the holidays and they all do the baptism and the christenings and I forget when they turn like 7 or 8 and have the white dress or white suit. They all do that, but they don't really go to church weekly.
Really? Okay. That's interesting.
Mostly because they're all working class. They're all working Some of them working 7 days a week. So any free time they get, they're not giving up to church.
Okay, so kind of like worshiping at home,
It's
personally.
like, God, you can have my soul, but you can't have my time.
Oh, that's awesome. So I guess it doesn't sound like they're necessarily that in your face, but have they done anything that you find offensive necessarily?
Well, not my wife's family. My family, on the other hand, and I talked to them quite a bit, and especially, before I had my own family and went to see them much more often. I have some family members who are born again, some who are quite a bit over the top, and it's not so much that they do or say things that are offensive, but the arrogance of the certainty that they have that they're right and you're wrong, that I kind of find offensive. That they're all part of God's plan, and they're telling me that I'm part of God's plan, and I just don't understand, uh, is nerve-wracking. Is because you just want to shake them and say, "Wake up! What How can you be so certain? I mean, how deep is your brainwashing?" And not all of them. I find one consistency among pretty much everyone who's born again or really devout is something happened, some trauma or some incident happened that they found God and went overboard. My sister,
Yeah.
unfortunately, was in an abusive relationship. She'd always been very religious, but to get through this horrible marriage, she found God. God was her anchor, and she went over the top. I've got a cousin who had really poor health, and he got through the poor health, but in the process, he found God, and all of a sudden, he is quoting scriptures and telling me God's word and God's plan, and I debate him every time we see each other, and I get along well with everyone in my family, but we're neither one is going to convince the other. It's all very civil, but I'm shaking my head at them, and they're shaking their head at me, and thinking, "What's wrong with you? Why can't you see the big picture?"
I I I agree with you about the born again Christians or religious people. It seems like it is really common for something traumatic to happen. In my family, it's been a near-death experience or an accident that they expected they should have gotten hurt worse in. Rehab is a big one. Anytime one of them comes out of rehab, they found God, which is sad because I've seen a lot of their posts on Facebook, and so they'll say, I'm thanking God for another day that I'm sober, or another day that I'm alive. But then if something happens and they relapse, then they blame themselves,
Yeah.
and it's their own fault. And I just feel I feel compelled to be like, it's not God that's keeping you sober. You're doing it yourself. You should be thanking your own inner strength.
Yeah. It's always God that gets the credit for something positive, and it's always because God gave you free will to screw up that gets credit for the bad things. I have a bad habit with friends and family, and now that I have my own separate Facebook page, I don't do it so much. But every time somebody would post something like, I've got through cancer, and through God's help, I got through cancer, and I like to point out, it's like, so did God give you the cancer that He helped get you out of? Because if God's plan is doing everything, God gave you the cancer.
Right.
You know, you can't have it both ways. You can't just say, God help me. If God helped you out of something bad, then it must have been God who put you into something bad.
Yeah. Typically, your free will doesn't get you like leukemia. I mean, or
Yeah.
or net cancer unless you're like a smoker or something, I guess. Okay, so you don't have, they don't say a lot of things that are particularly offensive, but you said that it sounds like their arrogance and
Yeah, the attitude. I have one
right.
cousin who believes that everything on earth was put here for our use. So he's free to kill anything and squash anything, and he just, it's not God's creatures, it's God's supply chain to us.
Oh,
Humans are the supreme thing, and God made everything for humans, and everything's for us just to use as we please. So he kills things, and I mean, not just hunting, but like insects. He just kills anything because he doesn't want to look at it.
wow.
And being a environmentalist as well as atheist, that makes me bonkers. That attitude of everything's here for me. God made it all for us. We are the supreme thing on the planet. Which is true with a lot of people who are religious. They just think that, God made us special. Which,
So I guess I sympathize with being an environmentalist, and I guess what I would ask him is what happens as the natural resources that were put here for you start to run out, um, as they kind of are right now. I mean, what would you say to that? Obviously, he's taking them away from you.
another pitfall of religion. I don't know if you remember one of the Kirk Cameron movies of
Oh, Left Behind?
Left Behind.
That's the only one I know he was in, yeah.
He, my cousin, among many other people I know, are of the opinion that God's going to take them all. So they're not worried about natural resources because God's going to take them before things run out.
Okay, I forgot about that.
Because God's going to, lift them up to heaven, and schmucks like me are going to be left behind to deal with,
That's right.
the death
Okay. I forgot about that. Kirk Cameron is a gem. Love him. I don't have a lot of necessarily devout family members that are preaching at me or proselytizing to my kids. Very small things here and there that they will mention as far as family members being in heaven, or God watching over you and making sure that nothing's going to happen to you. And they haven't tried to take them to church, so nothing that I've had to sound off on or put my foot down for. So I'm kind of fortunate in that. And I know, Aubrey, you said you don't even really have any devout family members necessarily, right?
No, no one in my family goes to church. As far as I know, the only people in my children's lives and their family that go to church are my husband's parents. And they're very non-preachy. They're very devout, but they're not young Earth creationists. They're not Bible literists. And like I said, they have a very positive view of God. That one day God is going to reveal Himself to us heathens, and we will make our way into heaven. So it doesn't even come up in conversation. So I'm very lucky in that way.
That's how the majority of my family is. They're very laid back about it, and they think I'm an uppity atheist.
Uppity? Are you uppity because you're outspoken? Is that what they mean?
Pretty much, yeah.
Oh, okay. That's funny.
So that goes. If you don't.
Really outspoken is when they start saying, "Oh, we're going to pray for you," and that's when I get uppity.
So if you don't mind, since we're on this topic, I'd like to ask the question: what happens when you bring up your atheism or your non-belief to your devout family members?
Well, like I said, I've been an atheist pretty much my entire life. Most of my family knew before I did, which is another comparison to homosexuality. So they've always known. So I've never really had to bring it up. And like I said, I only can really expose it. They're pushing the religion. But my parents, my stepmother, whenever I say I go to church, she's like, "Oh, and you didn't get struck by lightning?" Which I'm like, really? And maybe she's joking, or maybe she just, wants to drive home. Like my little sister said to me once, "Don't you want to believe just in case?" And I said,
Oh.
"Just in case what?"
Yeah, we talked about that last time, Pascal's wager.
Yeah.
we have people, friends of Steve, uh, who had said that to us when I think we were at his high school reunion, and she's like, I don't have a problem with atheists. You can believe whatever you want to believe, but if I'm wrong, no big deal. But if you're wrong, hey, that's on you. And it's just like, okay, well, whatever. It's just like, I'm just gonna believe just in case.
Yeah.
So maybe everybody else should. I was like, no.
I run into that quite a bit. A lot of people on Facebook and YouTube, they're all like, I'm fine with atheists. Like, why would you not be fine with an atheist? I mean,
yeah.
An atheist is just a person without the God. Quite often I hate the term atheist. I hate to have a label to say I'm not part of any of these other groups. But you can't tell people I don't believe in God because they're like, I don't understand what you mean by that. What do you mean you don't believe in God? Like, there must be something wrong with you. But when you say atheist, you're like, oh, you're one of those people. So it's,
yeah. It's certainly got some other things attached to it, unfortunately.
Yes.
Yeah, and I think primarily because a lot of people don't understand it. I mean, I just know even adults to this day who think it's like devil worshipping.
Yeah.
And it's just like, oh, come on, educate yourself. So yeah.
Well, the other thing I get often, I mean, all the time, is people telling me that, well, you're not really atheist, you're really agnostic. Like, you tell me what I mean.
Yeah.
How do you make that in comparison? I mean, atheist is, I don't think there's a God, any God. Agnostic is, well, I don't know, there could be, but I don't know, maybe, I don't know.
Oh yeah, the religious people, they want you to identify as agnostic because they think they might still be able to turn you. They think if you're agnostic that they might still have a chance. I got proselytized a lot more during the period of my life where I identified as agnostic than as atheist.
This is what I tell people. When they pull up the argument of how do you know for sure there's no God, I say, well, I don't know for sure there's no God. I'm 99.999% sure there's no God, but I am 100% sure that your God is not real.
Right. Yeah, there's definitely some I don't know what the word I'm looking for. It's kind of wishy-washy between agnostic and atheist and anti-theist, because I think from what I understand, what is it anti-theist where you're very confident that there's no God, like there's no God, whereas atheist is you just
religion.
Oh, okay. I can't remember which one it was where you don't believe or you absolutely know there's no God, but I don't know. Anyway. Okay, let's see. Aubrey, did you have any other follow-up questions to that before we move on? Just curious.
No. We talked about children. I guess we could bring this up. Are there any ground rules that you've set with your family, with your daughter?
Like I said, she's only 6, so it's kind of a free-for-all because I want her to be exposed to and to know as much as possible. So there's nothing that I want to hold back from her, and I'm very honest with her. I don't want to say that I treat her like an adult, but I don't candy coat anything. That's the biggest thing about the story of heaven is, oh, Grandma died, she's in heaven, she's in a better place, and which is, a load of crap, but that's what we tell kids so they don't feel bad. And I'm very honest with my daughter. I say, they're gone. They're just, they're gone. They were here, and we remember them, so they will always exist in our memories, and we have lots of pictures of them. But as a person, we're never going to see them again. And she's been fine with that. I've had my mother died, my grandmother died, so she's very aware of people that she's known that she knows she's never going to see again.
Mm-hmm.
But she's 6 years old, and occasionally she gets in the bout of she doesn't want to die, she doesn't want us to die, and she gets very upset about that. But people who are dead, she's fine with. She seems to really understand that, they're not there anymore. And really, that's what death is the lack of being.
Right. Yeah, and I think people don't give their kids enough credit as far as grasping concepts like that and being able to, take them in stride without melting down, and just having an issue with it for the rest of their lives. Because our 6-year-old, we've said the same thing, as far as, some people think that there's a heaven where your, family members go after they die, but it's, we don't believe that. We feel pretty confident that they are gone, and you'll always remember them. And we've never had an issue, he's never lashed out saying that, it's horrible. So, yeah.
Well, death is a tricky subject, especially dealing with people. Dealing with animals, I found that my daughter's fine with death as long as they're not cute. We see some dead animals, and if it's like a snake or frog or something, she's fine with. But if it's a squirrel or something cute, she gets upset by it. But the other day, there was a bird that, and it was full of ants, and she made a comment about all the ants on it, and I said, well, the ants are eating the bird. Later that day, there was a bird in the yard, and it was pegging at the ground. I say, see what the bird's doing? It's eating ants. When a bird's alive, it eats the ants. When a bird's dead, the ants eat the bird. That she seemed fine with.
I have had a little bit of experience with that. Aubrey, you're going to have to correct me if I'm wrong. I can't remember. But somebody was telling me about how they had some sort of animal die in their backyard. And instead of, getting rid of it right away, they let it stay there, and they had their kids come out and watch it decompose and talk about the process of how it kind of went back into the earth to nourish the other animals and plant life around it. I don't know if you've ever done that, but I don't think I'd be able to have something just hanging out in the back. I've got 2 dogs, so they'd probably do something with it. I don't
We
think I'd
have
want
not
to.
done anything quite that extensive, but there's a nature preserve by our house, and we walk the trails sometimes, and there was a dead deer back there, and every 2 weeks, every month, we'd go and check it out and see how far it's decomposed. But it never turned into anything big and explanatory. It was just more like, hey, check out this rotting corpse. It wasn't, I wish I had done all that. But,
we have lots of rabbits and lots of neighborhood cats. So normally when we find a dead animal, it's only a piece of.
Yeah, that's kind of, we literally, I think just yesterday, my husband told me there was a dead squirrel outside, but one of our dogs had gotten to it, and so learning opportunity gone. Nothing I could do there. I like the idea, though, of kind of not shielding the kids from death. Obviously, you wouldn't do that with a human, but not shielding them and showing them exactly how it works, and not, having it be something they're afraid of or something that you won't explain to them because you're worried about them being scared or sad or something like that. I think that's important.
One thing you can do too is on Netflix. There's a cartoon that is the Magic School Bus.
Yeah.
And there is an episode about decomposition and basically the whole cycle of dead animals dying, other insects and animals are coming in, eating the corpse, and then their poop becomes part of the earth and makes new soil, so new plants can then grow, and the animals can eat the plants. It's done really well. Actually, it's a really good show, and my children love it and learn a lot from it. So if you don't want to have like a dead animal laying around, that's a good second.
It was full of rotting corpses and decomposition and all time-lapse kind of stuff. But I think, speaking of death, the way religion handles it is they're trying to convince you that the people who are dead aren't really gone. They're not really dead. they've gone off to a different place. They still exist somewhere, and you'll meet up with them later. Which I kind of find disturbing, that you're looking forward to seeing, dead relatives. And the way I handle it is just literally like a lack of being. When a person dies, they're no longer there. They exist only in our memories, and as long as we remember them, they're still around. But it's kind of like when you turn off a light, the light's no longer there, and life is very much like a light bulb, but you only get to turn it off once.
Oh, nice. I like that. I like the way that that's phrased. I'm glad you brought that up about heaven, because that's something that I was going to bring up. My in-laws, are theists and young Earth creationists, and they're very aggressive about the idea of heaven. And one of the things that would bother me about that, if they did try to, impose that on my kids, is that they would have to explain to my kids that my husband and I won't be there with them, so they will be, watching us burn in hell for eternity, and they would have to have no problem with that. They also believe. So my husband's grandfather committed suicide, and they also believe that if you commit suicide, you don't go to heaven. She would need to explain to them that she's watching her own father, rot in hell, as well as her son, who's a homosexual, and that's really disturbing. I have a problem with that, So I really don't like the idea of heaven, and people telling children that,
Yeah.
because they have to tell the other side of it about all the people who don't get into heaven and what happens to them.
That's what I did with my daughter. Like I said, a kid at school was talking to her about heaven and what a great place it is that you can go when you die. And I just came in as the quote-unquote devil's advocate. Like, oh, well, let me tell you, you learned about heaven. I'm going to tell you about hell now, because that's the other side that this person believes is going to happen to you. And what she got out of that was, well, I'm a good person, so I'm all right. And so it was a series of conversations. And I also just started talking to her about what I think happens when you die. I talked to her about reincarnation. And then, at the end, or actually all throughout the conversation, I told her, nobody knows for sure, because you can't come back and talk about it.
Right.
And so these are all just guesses at what people think happens to you when you die. And I think that really resonated with her, and I think that will resonate with all children if you just be honest and say, look, nobody knows, but here are some of the ideas, and give the good and the bad along with it, if that's what if you're going to talk about heaven, you have to talk about hell.
Right.
I get people who ask me, aren't you worried about going to hell? And I say, I don't believe there's a heaven. What makes you think I believe there's a hell?
Right. Yeah, they're both equally improbable.
A joke I like to use on some people who are very insistent about how great heaven is and how they're really looking forward to going to heaven. And I tell them, are you really looking forward to an eternity of your mother asking you why you didn't come to visit her more or call her more?
Oh, that's awesome. Oh my goodness. Yeah. Real quick. We have a note from Joey Cowan, who's my new friend, who's watching the show. Hi, Joey. Thanks for watching. One who claims to know there is no God is a Gnostic atheist. That's what I was looking for when I screwed that up earlier. It's not an anti-theist, Gnostic atheist. So thanks for that, Joey. Okay, let's see.
I'd say everybody's agnostic to some degree, as everyone's atheist to some degree. I mean, there's some things you can't know. You can't know something that cannot be proven. Is there a God? You can't know. You can't prove God, and you can't disprove God because it's in the realm of unknowable. Actually, another video I did was God has been pushed beyond space and time. God used to be the wind and the rain and right there with you, and then God was in heaven, and then God was in space, and now God is beyond space and time because we know about the wind and the rain, and we know about the earth and the heavens, and we know about space. So where's God now? It's pushed beyond what we can know.
Right,
But
yeah. Yeah, we've been able to explain a lot of phenomenons that we couldn't before, that our ancestors had used God to explain. So it's interesting that it keeps getting pushed back as more things are being able to explain with science or astronomy. Let's see. Um, so do you have, I think we kind of already covered it, but before you go to see family, do you do anything to kind of prepare your daughter to interact with her devout family members? Or do you just kind of,
let it happen. Because a lot of her cousins on my side, not so much her side, but on my wife's side, but on my side, all the kids are believers, and they all go to church, and they all talk about God, and in any kind of family event, if there's a prayer, and they're all, it's all very religious, and I just kind of let it happen. She takes my lead, and just kind of watches what I do, and I'll bow my head and kind of wink at her, like, this is something we have to do. It's just tradition, and really that's what religion is. It's tradition, and some people take the tradition and think it's based on reality, where I take it as just being tradition. It's something that you do when you're with family.
yeah, I haven't really dealt with it a lot in our family, which, like I said, I guess I'm lucky. One thing I am a little worried about, though, is school. I've said before that we live in a school district that has a huge religious population, and he's already had a few conversations in kindergarten with the kids in his class about God, and communicated to them that he doesn't believe himself. And he's hasn't really had pushback necessarily. Nobody's told him that he's going to hell, but one kid did say that they couldn't be twins. They were going to be twins that day, and he said, well, you can't be my twin unless you believe in God. And so he came home and he said, well, I decided to believe in God just for today so we could be twins. I was like, okay, well, do what you got to do, I guess.
Well, I figure it this way. Kids only believe what we tell them to believe, because they're looking to us to know what's real and what's not real. And at this age, my daughter, she has a very good imaginary life. She has imaginary friends. She has an imaginary brother named George.
George, oh.
But she knows they're imaginary. One of our neighbors has a statue of Mickey, and since my daughter was born and able to know what's going on, I've been speaking in the voice of Mickey to her, and she acknowledges it as Mickey. And as she got older, she could tell it was me that was talking, but she would still interact with the statue as if it was the statue talking. I mean, she's 6 years old, and when we go past that house, she still says hi to Mickey and has a conversation. So, I mean, and it's amazing what she remembers. There was one house that had a window up in the attic of their garage, and for whatever reason, I told her that there was a chicken up there, and she would have a conversation with the chicken. And I forget what it was, but one day she's like, "Where's the chicken? I want to talk to the chicken." It's like, well, I don't know if the chicken's there. She goes, "But I want to see it. It's delicious."
Well, at least.
And she's still, like, I wish the chicken still lived in that house. And she knows it was always me, but she'd like that interaction that, I was playing with her in her fantasy world. And I still do that with the Mickey statue. And I play with her about her little brother, and she actually made a little cutout. Said, "This is my little brother." Like, oh, cool, because
my 6-year-old doesn't need to imagine a little brother because he's got a little brother and a little sister who I'm sure he thinks that's plenty of siblings.
Yeah.
No more. I don't need to make any up. So.
My daughter is desperate for a sibling.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. But her mother's like, nope, one's enough.
Yeah, it can feel like that sometimes.
She's
Um,
very fortunate where she has a lot of cousins and neighbors that are her age, so she's fortunate in that arena. So
yeah, that's always good as long as they have a good group of kids that they are exposed to. I think that's important. Um, Aubrey, I know you've had some issues with your daughter's school when it comes to the religion thing. So I think that I'm I have liked some of the insight that you offered because, like I said, I'm getting really nervous about it because I'm not very confrontational, but at the same time, I don't want to let them, I don't want to let them impose anything on my son. So I don't know
I
if you want to talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, I've done a couple different things, and one of the things that I do is at the beginning of school every year, I either send an email or I have a conversation with the teacher, and I tell the teacher, listen, we are not religious, and I never say atheist because I don't want the shock and that we're these evil people right off the bat. So I go with non-religious to start with. And I remind them of the law. And I say, just so you know, you are a public school teacher, and I don't you keep your religion at home, and you start bringing your religion to school. You are breaking the law, and I'm going to bark if I hear about any kind of pushing of religion coming from you. And so far, so good. All the teachers are like, "Oh no, no, no! That's not my thing. I don't want to do that." But they all tell you, "But I'm Christian." Just so you know, except for only one teacher so far has said that she was also non-religious. Everyone else is made damn sure that I knew that they were Christian.
Oh,
Uh,
really?
but it's been good.
too.
There was there was an incident this year, and Amanda, I think I've told you about it, where my daughter says she doesn't believe in God. She doesn't take the atheist label. She just doesn't believe in God, and that's where we're at, and I'm fine with that. And there was some conversation at school, and it came out, and then like a couple weeks or a couple months later, I'm not sure the timeline, these couple of girls were really kind of bullying her a little bit and telling her, well, you're untrustworthy. You don't believe in God, so you're untrustworthy. And there would be times when they would have like free time in the classroom and they were allowed to kind of get up and move around and sit next to whoever they wanted. And this one girl in particular wouldn't let Aura sit in her seat because she's untrustworthy. And so I had a conversation with the teacher about it, and the teacher put the kibosh on it. And she tried very hard to be very proactive. I don't 100% agree with her method, but it worked. And there was no more talk of my daughter being untrustworthy. So far so good. But I live in the north, It's not like being in the south or being in a extremely religious area. I'm not in an extremely religious area. In fact, I'm in a pretty diverse area. There's Hindus in this school. There are Muslims in this school. There are Chinese in this school. It's mostly white Protestant, but there's enough in there where there's some awareness by all the teachers and administrators that they can't sit comfy cozy on Christianity and talk about it like it's the only thing.
That's how my daughter's like. Like I said, it's got a very strong Muslim community here. A lot of the teachers are Muslims, and the women are with the hijab and fully dressed, very Muslim. And
Public school
I have
teachers? Public school teachers?
yes.
Oh, okay.
So I'm not sure about if they're teachers, but they work in the school. So,
Oh,
but
that's interesting.
I have mixed feelings on the whole let teachers expose kids and thing. I don't want it. I like the idea of separation of church and state, but people are people and they have their beliefs, and they're going to expose what they think. And I
And
do.
that's fine. I agree with you on that. I never want anyone to feel like they can never say what they believe, and that's not something I tell the teachers. I tell them that they cannot uh, proselytize,
Yeah.
basically, is where I go with it. And I try to say it in the nicest way I possibly
Oh,
can. One of the things that I do say is, if you have to talk about religion, for whatever reason, and there are good reasons to talk about religion in the classroom from time to time, um, and you're talking about your religion or the dominant religion, which in my school district is Christianity, make sure that you're not saying this is what we believe or
yeah.
this is what we do. Um, Go with some people or many people or Christians. Don't have this attitude that this is what we all are, and then when you do that, you automatically out my daughter because she does not believe at the moment anyway, um, and making her feel like an outcast by putting this we or we all uh, language into that kind of instruction. So I try to present solutions to problems that could arise, and like I said, the teachers I've talked to so far have been pretty receptive.
Well, I figure turnabout is fair play, and I do this with my daughter and her friends and my nieces and nephews. Pretty much any kids that I like talking about religion, and I like talking about religion as an abstract idea rather than as a um, practice based in reality. Pretty much every kid that comes into our house or that we go see, and any form of religion comes up, the first thing I always ask them is, do you believe in God, and why do you believe in God? And it's always the same answer because my parents believe in God, and that's what they told me. And I said, well, have you ever wondered why other people believe in different gods? And I bring up other religions and the fact that there's all kinds of different religions and all kinds of different beliefs. Because a lot of kids, they're only aware of their religion that they've been told.
Exactly.
They're not
Yep.
really exposed to anything. And I like to expose them to religious ideas and to
It,
real question
but
why.
public schools shouldn't be doing that though, and when they do a shitty job.
Oh yeah, they don't tell you what they believe, and. And since I don't believe any of it, it's very easy for me to give them a very broad exposure to everything and very unbiased because I don't really say that I don't say that I'm an atheist, but I make it very clear that I don't believe any of these stories and that they're all based on tradition and they're all made up and everybody believes something different and everyone's telling you different rules and there's a reason for that. It's because they made it up.
I just worry as far as if the teachers and all of the students in the classroom are subscribing to this, and then he sees other authority figures besides just my husband and I, that he's going to feel ostracized and he's going to feel like maybe we're the ones who don't know what we're talking about. So I really have. Yeah, I'm really worried, that we aren't, it, I don't know how to explain it, but I want to make sure that we are expressing how we feel, and still getting through to him so that he feels comfortable, believing what he wants to believe. I don't know if I explained that right. I'm going to
No,
stop talking.
I have the same exact fear, and that's one of the reasons why I started seeking out other atheists and trying. I've never tried harder to make friends. Just this need. I'm like, I have to have atheist friends, and I have to, people that wear the label, and I can talk to my children about. Well, there are other atheists. Mommy and Daddy aren't the only ones. And then also, I don't know if you know this, Amanda, but I did write a children's fiction novel. That I wrote it basically for my daughter And in the book, the little girl is her parents are atheist, and she's not decided, and that was the way her parents kind of raised her, where she didn't have to decide, and but she knew a lot about a good amount about religion, and then she has the conflict in the story is that she has a friend that tries to make her decide. And one of the reasons I wrote that is I was thinking about the fact that my daughter doesn't really have any friends that are non-believers. And if she could open up a book and read about another little girl that was a non-believer, or at least undecided about how she felt about religion or what she believed, that would take some of that loneliness, or that I'm the only one, out of her life. So those are my remedies so far. If I come up with any more, I'll let you know.
Yeah.
I've been playing with an idea for my own children's book called Daddy's an Atheist. And basically what the story is father and his daughter, of course, and meeting all of Daddy's friends. And each one of Daddy's friends is a different religion. And explaining what, this is my friend so-and-so, this is what he believes. And this is my friend so-and-so, this is what she believes. This is my friend so-and-so, this is what they believe. And Daddy's an atheist because he thinks all their beliefs are just beliefs, that they're not really real.
That's a good idea.
It is, yeah. I like that. And I definitely agree as far as creating a network of non-believers around you. I've told you several times before that we joined the atheist parents group in our community, and it was one of the best decisions we've ever made. We actually spent Easter with them, which was so great, not to have to spend it with religious family members, because sometimes holidays...
We out on Easter.
Yeah, it's like sometimes, holidays with family members are tough as it is, and on like an Easter and Christmas, it's just brutal. And we're going to be seeing them for the 4th, too. So it feels really good to be like, sorry, we got plans that day, you guys. We're not going to make it.
Yeah, Easter is an exceptional holiday that people like to reinforce their beliefs on you. And I like to point out, do you really realize what you're celebrating? You're celebrating a guy getting beaten to death.
Yeah.
That's not a What's that got to do with chocolate eggs and bunny rabbits?
Oh, exactly. I was looking into that a lot the last Easter because I didn't realize that, I'm like, you guys are celebrating a resurrection. Why the F are we hunting for eggs? This makes no sense. So, yeah.
One of the reasons why I got so involved in YouTube was the fact that it is amazingly difficult to find an atheist, even in Chicago. The north side has a lot more atheists, and there's a couple of atheist groups, but on the south side, there's nothing. I'd say 99.5% of people I work with are religious to some degree. I know of 2 other people who are atheists out of 500 people.
Wow.
And all my neighbors are all believers, and it seems like everyone I know.
Yeah.
We spend a lot of time in the library, and for whatever reason, religion comes up, and I'll let it slip that I'm an atheist, and they're like, "Really? That's really interesting." Like, it's very interesting. I don't believe in anything. What's interesting about that?
Yeah. Well, they have all those preconceived notions, like we were talking about. So you're surrounded. Wow.
Yeah, I'm very surrounded.
Yeah. Well, it's nice that you have an outlet now, at least with your YouTube channel and all your videos.
South. I used to live in Georgia and North Carolina, right, in the heart of the Bible Belt, and a lot of Baptists, and especially in Georgia, they come right to your door to talk to you, and I invite them in, and I would tell them what I think. I have a story when I was in college. I had a guy who stopped me in the student union to tell me about, God and such. And we got into a fairly lengthy conversation that got rather heated. And the conversation ended with him basically walking away from me rather quickly, going, "You're going to hell! You're going to hell!"
Oh my gosh.
I'm,
And a good day to you, sir.
yeah, it was pretty funny to me, but
Wow.
yeah, there's even in college,
Yeah.
I've been surrounded by religious people for whatever reason. I find it very hard to find other atheists in the real world, but online it's been great.
Yeah. There's definitely a strong online community of atheists. My husband and I found that as well. Yeah. So it's 7:05. We're 5 minutes past time, but I didn't want to end the conversation because I've been having a good time. But I do just want to ask, and we'll talk about your YouTube channel in just a second, Tom, but I want to ask if there's anything you felt like you didn't get to say or want to bring up before we go?
That's true. I've got too much to say, so.
No, I totally understand.
I'm sure there's the time.
Yep. Okay. How about you, Aubrey? Any last words?
No, I don't have anything to say.
Okay. Okay, I don't either. So before we really go, Tom, why don't you talk about you can oh God, my husband says pimp, and now I can't think of anything else to say. Do a little
Pimp
PR
yourself
for
out a
your
little bit,
project.
yeah.
Yes. Oh my gosh, I can't think of anything more appropriate to say now. I'm totally jaded. Any projects you're working on? Anything you want to talk about that you want people to know?
Well, like I said, I'm continually doing videos, and I created the new Facebook page. Basically, if you do a Google search for Tom Leeds Atheist, you'll find me. And on YouTube, it's Tom the Atheist On, and also on Facebook, Tom the Atheist On, because that's my the videos I do are an atheist on whatever that particular topic is going to be. So those three searches will definitely find me.
Yes, I found you on YouTube by just typing in Tom Leeds, and that's Leeds for
Yes.
anybody who doesn't know. And are you on Twitter?
Yes.
What's the Twitter?
I think it's so long for now. SOLONG, the number 4, NOW.
Okay, good. I tagged the right person then. Yay! I was worried about that.
Yeah.
I can get those links up too.
Email address before I started doing the whole, atheist thing.
Yeah. Okay.
But
Okay.
I got the same image on all of them. So if you see it, the picture of me and my hat and my daughter, and a picture of house is my wallpaper on all of them. So if you see those, it's same guy.
Come to the right place. Awesome. Yeah, I really liked your videos, the ones that I've seen. So I encourage everybody to go check that out on YouTube and go subscribe. Yeah, that's about all that we have. I guess I can make sure that you go to godlessfamily.com. You can subscribe to some really amazing resources for you and teaching your children. Definitely follow us on Twitter at godlessfamily. And I think next week we are going to be talking to Candace Bell about teaching science to preschoolers. That's right, Aubrey?
That is correct.
Okay, awesome. So we're really excited to have her on. I know Candace, she was with us on ProphetCast, and she has young kids that she is really interested in teaching science to. So make sure that you watch that show next week, next Tuesday at the same time. Again, Tom, thank you so much for joining us. It was so great to have you on the show. Hopefully we'll be able to talk to you again soon.
I'd love to.
Okay. Thanks for watching Godless Family, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.